I've never been on this and got it. Good.
So we're up and running. I thank you so much, Rebecca Mottram, for being on the Legacy Life podcast for this episode. And today we're going to be talking about everything to do with potty training and child, infant, everything, hygiene. And I'm so excited to have Rebecca on because we met because we are rare in how we chose to do pottying, toileting, whatever you want to call it. And one of the big things that I always think and say, because as everybody knows, I'm all about communication, that really, in terms of potty training, what I will say and what my views are is, particularly if you're doing it with very little ones and babies, is the person you are training is not the child, it is you. So that is my view, and I'll let you know why I think that. And Rebecca and I will have a chat about this. She is an expert in her field. She is an incredible human being, and I have watched her go from, well, I've got these ideas to rocking an incredible business, helping so many families. And she's the go-to person if I am referring anybody who is struggling with potty training, or any of that side of things. Rebecca is the person who I would refer you to. So thank you for being my go-to expert in this area.
Oh, that's so nice. What a great introduction. And it's so interesting what you said about training the parents and not the child, because so many times I see that people comment that they say, oh, well, you know, if you put your baby on a potty and do this elimination communication, posh word for baby pottying thing, then you are essentially training yourself. And there definitely is an element of that. But I wouldn't agree with it 100%.
Ooh,
I have to say, cool. I think there's definitely an element of that, but it's not the whole thing.
Yes. Well, it's rarely the whole story, is it?
Yeah.
But I suppose with the work that I do, mindset is such a huge part of it. It's such a massive part of it, and how we view things is massive, you know, to do with whether we would even get started doing something. So
well, there's so many problems around potty training in terms of what parents are expecting, what other parents have told them, what they've been reading, what they think, what happened to them, how their grandparents said it, what their friends did. There's like a world of advice out there, including all this kind of thing, like what me and you are doing now and putting stuff out there on the internet. And it's really hard to know what to trust. And I think, you know, I know that this is like a legacy podcast as part of your program for that. And I think you kind of asked me to have a think about what is my legacy. I think the one of the things is really making parents get the right information. And it's difficult to be the voice when you know that, I mean, I know that what I'm saying is correct because it's based on research evidence, and because I'm a nurse and that's how I've been taught how to work, that, you know, you can't look after people if you can't say why you're doing it, and you can't justify your choices based on work that's been done to show that it will be effective. So in my work of potty training, that's how I approach it. And so I know when I give advice to people that it's the right advice based on the best available evidence that we have, and that's how we should look after people. But unfortunately, there's just so much out there on the internet that affects the way people think, and they don't have the confidence, they don't know what to do. This is definitely a legacy of mine, to get people the right information.
Yeah, thank you for answering my legacy question. And it is something that I do ask people, and I think with the word legacy, it can seem quite grand, right? It can seem quite huge, but I believe that we all are creating our legacy right now, you know, on a day-to-day basis, with the decisions we make, the actions we take, and that all makes up our legacy. and that desire and that passion to have people get the right information so that they can be empowered, because it can be a tricky time. There are tricky transitions, aren't there, through our parenting journey, and this
it's a big trigger, isn't it, for people, potty training. They come up to the milestone and they're like, oh my God. And maybe some people don't really think about it and it goes great for them, and I'm so happy for them. And some people do think about it and they try and get it right and it still goes wrong. And some people don't think about it at all and then it goes completely wrong. And some people are really diligent and they try to get the best advice, but like you say, there's just so much different advice out there. It can be hard to navigate. And I think legacy as well, is about the life you're living. It's about creating things in this life, but it's also about what you leave behind. And to me, I desperately want to change the mainstream thinking that potty training has to happen at a set time when the child is ready, and this whole concept of readiness, or you can only do it in the summer, or you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way, because isn't so much of parenting actually about listening to our instincts and kind of learning to hear that voice and learning to trust that voice and learning to be the parent, like be the one in charge, be the one that makes the decisions and guide your child and teach them what they need to learn. So yes, I do think that it is training the parent, because the right mindset of knowing it's your job and this is something you have to do, and it's not going to happen without you, and your child is not going to magically wake up one morning and say, hey, what, Mum, tell you what, I've been thinking about this, and I want to ditch the nappies and I just want to wear pants, and I'm going to be on the case with this. What I will literally pay a 4-figure sum to the first parent who can demonstrate to me that is what their child did, that they came to them and said those words or words to that effect, because I'm telling you, I've never ever seen that. Parents have to take the lead. So yes, we have to train parents to think about what their children need and take that role to teach them. And we also have to teach parents to look at what their child is telling them and the gift that their child is giving them with the information and the knowledge. If you know what to look for, and we're not talking about readiness signs, because frankly that's just not proven and it's very misleading, but your child will tell you. I would defy any parent to tell me that they've never seen their child's poo face.
The poo
Everyone
face.
knows
the poo face. Absolutely.
So, your child gives you all that stuff. They tell you. So they are training you in that way.
Absolutely. And that's what I mean by the person needing the training is us. And the mindset piece is this, because of how society does, our community, our society, whatever we've learned does things, from birth, we kind of learn to systematically ignore the communication that's coming from our children. And so one of the things that
they learn to not tell us.
They learn
because they learn that we ignore it. So they're like, oh, I don't need to do anything about this. I don't need to tell you about this. I can just ignore it too.
Yeah. So they learn from us to ignore, to ignore it. And it's and it doesn't have to be that way. And we live in a culture in the UK where that's how things are done. And then we look for the when they're ready business, which is
And I think it's crazy, but I think with readiness, actually, you can influence that, and you can influence it either way. So like you're saying, if you tell your child that to use their nappy as the toilet, and that's what becomes normal, and essentially that means very low maintenance for you just kind of change it when you need to, but you don't acknowledge the process as it's happening, and you don't ever give them a different experience. So what they learn is that the nappy is the toilet, and that's their normal. So you're not developing their readiness skills, but actually innately children are born with this desire to communicate with us about everything. So they will tell us, oh, my body feels this way. They'll wriggle, they'll cry, you know, they'll say, oh, I've got this cry, I'm tired. And you will learn to interpret that. And actually, there is all the other signals that go around toileting. And so if you pick up on those, then you teach your child, hey, yeah, I get that you're pooing. I understand what's happening. And you know, I can do something about that. And you teach your child that that communication is important. And so then, you know, people who haven't done that, sometimes they just think their child is literally, like I said, just going to pipe up one day and say, well, I've been thinking about this and this is what I want to do. And they're not. But like, if you've systematically and consistently, you know, not every day, not every single time you can totally use nappies, but if you have frequently and regularly given them a different experience of not pooing in the nappy, but pooing in the potty or a toilet, and telling them that's what they're doing and teaching them that stuff, then actually they will have that in their communication repertoire. And maybe then they will come and they will indicate very clearly that that's what they want to do from now on. So that's the dream. That's obviously the dream child.
That is the dream child, isn't it? That is the dream child. And, you know, it's interesting. Because it's not easy doing things differently. You know, I remember with my first child, my friend told me about a friend of hers who was basically catching their child's you know, poos and wees, and I was like, my first thought was, I cannot even go there. Like, there's so much, it feels so overwhelming as a first time parent. There's just so much to get my head around, all the different signals, the you know, you know, knowing when they're hungry, knowing when they're tired, all this stuff. And I just thought, adding another thing in, like, I haven't got the space for it. I just have not got the capacity for it. And that's, so I had heard about that, but I just thought, I don't feel like I can do it. And not being, you know, not having support, or that's, you know, it kind of felt to me as well, it's not something you see, like, you can't just learn how to do that. I mean, it's similar to, I remember going to India, and in India, when I went there, they, you know, didn't use toilet roll. They, you know, you wash after you go to the toilet, right? And I was like, okay, so, and as an adult, I thought, well, I can't really ask you, how's that work then? How do you do it? You know, what does that look like? Can you show me? Because it's not something you ask people, is it? But it's something as a child, you would go to the toilet. Yeah, how do you dry? How does it all work?
So it's put my clothes back on, a massive wet patch.
Exactly. It's like, how does that
like,
what's the etiquette here? How does this all work? But as an adult, you can't really just ask your host to just go, can you just take me to the loo with you and I'll just see how you do it. It's really not what you do, is it?
No.
Yeah, but when we're, you know, with our children, that's how our children learn. You know, they learn from us, like, what to do. And, you know, with a little one, you just learn, and then you just do what everybody else does, and that's how you do it, isn't it? So,
and it's interesting as well, though, that you said as a parent it's felt like adding something in.
It did.
And I wonder if in cultures where, for example, well, let's just say a culture where pottying is more normalized and nappies are less mainstream or less available or too expensive or not considered to be the best option, let's say. And maybe some of these cultures as well do other things differently, like maybe they don't use a knife and fork. So if we were to say to them, hey, you know, you got to teach your child how to feed themselves using this fork, they'd be like, oh my god, I just can't cope with adding this in, this is just way too much, it's like the extra thing, what the hell. And like, but actually it's just because, like you say, your mindset is not prepared for that. Your mindset's prepared to teach them in the way that you know. And so
and that is modeled around you, you know, that is easy,
absolutely.
that it's like what everybody else is doing, and we can just do what everyone else is doing, right? And so, and then with my second child, and I suppose with my second child, I knew with parenting, there's so much that we're learning, like what kind of parent we want to be. and that we're becoming, that so much happens with that first child, doesn't it? We're learning so much, and then when the second one comes, we kind of have made a lot of decisions about who we are as a parent and what we stand for, how we want to do things. We've kind of worked out a lot of that. So when my second child was born, I then went, okay, well, let's have a look at this EC thing and what it is and how it works. And
I remember that's when you first contacted me, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Because
and
you were
that's
like, oh, hey,
how we
I
met.
heard that you're a weirdo as well. Let's get together.
Let's be weirdos together.
Went from there, didn't it, really?
I was so excited. I think you put a post out on Facebook saying, is anybody else doing this? And I was like,
Yeah.
yay, I am.
Yeah.
And that's how we met. And it was so cool just being around somebody else who is also doing that,
Yeah, you need that. You definitely need that peer-to-peer support.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's how we met, and I found it massively satisfying.
You never want to go back, do you? Once you've had that experience of catching that massive sloppy poo that would have gone down the legs all the way up the back and even into the back of the hair.
Oh, we've all been there.
And we've all done that. And you get one of those in the toilet, you're just like, I am winning at life. And everybody will say that because it's so good, and you think, I don't even know whether to tell anyone. I don't know who to tell. Who can I tell? And so many people come into the group and say, oh my God, I just had to tell somebody. And because it feels so good, and it doesn't feel wrong. It never at any point do you think, oh my God, I probably need to book some psychotherapy courses for my child now, because undoubtedly I've ruined them for the rest of their life because I did this terrible thing. You're thinking, yes, oh my God, that was the best thing ever. So you totally feel it.
Yeah, amazing. And I think because I had with my youngest, she had a lot of skin problems, allergies and stuff. And I was like, things weren't easy. And I felt really proud of myself that I was doing that anyway, because other things weren't easy. And I was just like, gosh, if I can do this with everything I've got going on, anyone can. Do you know what I mean? Because
it's really validating.
Yeah. And I kind of realized for the first 9 months I didn't really have pooey nappies. And I didn't
can remember your littlest one sitting there in the play group on her potty, and you like thinking, I wonder what's happened, and have a look, and there's, oh my God, she's done a wee, and like everybody in the room was like, wow, that's so cool. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was just really, it was really cool. And but I had this whole thing that I didn't want to do going nappy free. Like I didn't feel comfortable with that. And that feels like a leap, particularly being in a colder country as well and stuff.
Yeah, I think it is.
That feels like a big leap. So
I think it's totally
did
wrong
it with using nappies. I didn't not use nappies, just to be, and I did a real combination of washable nappies, disposable nappies, and using a potty or toilet.
And that's so good, because what you did was you added in a potty or toilet into your toolkit.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do. And it doesn't have to be all the time. And I think it's real unrealistic and possibly even wrong to simply take out from one culture what works for them and think that you can transplant that into another culture that's entirely different. Because like you say, we don't have the kind of mainstream culture of this being normalized. People may even feel like they have to keep their choices somewhat private because other people might attack them for their choice or their opinion, or think that they're somehow harming their child. And there's not a culture of understanding. So I think it's great to find a compromise, and I absolutely agree with you. And I use nappies with both of mine as well. So it's a really common misconception that to do this it's all or nothing. It's absolutely not. You can just drip feed your child a little exposure here and there, and you can avoid so many problems down the line that come from your child never having thought about it in another way.
Yeah,
because that's what happens, isn't it?
Yeah, it is because like Yeah, it absolutely is. And I know a lot of people get to that point where their child, if they haven't used a potty or a toilet at all until later on, you know, then it can be hard going to the toilet another way. You know, and I'm sure lots of people be able to relate to a child needing to put a nappy on to go to the toilet, or needing to stand privately in a corner or something, because they're not used to sitting and going to the toilet, because it's not something they've done. So I suppose it's part of a range of experiences, isn't it?
Definitely.
You know, I
and
love
I think,
what you said about this toolkit, you know, having
it's a toolkit. And I think if you're a parent listening to this and you're thinking, oh my God, I've done it all wrong, and what they're basically saying is I should have done all this stuff, and you know, there's two ways you can go at that. You can say, oh yeah, and therefore I'm a terrible parent, I'll never succeed, I'm not going to bother with this, and these people are really judgmental and they just think they know everything, and aren't they just the perfect parents, and oh my God, I'm so not. You've seen Motherland. I'm on basic level parenting quite a lot of the time, so it's definitely not about winning the parenting kind of sweepstake.
And there is no perfect, so let's just say that there is no perfect.
But it's about thinking, okay, well, now I know that, and maybe because I knew that, if I were to rewind time with that knowledge, maybe I would do things differently. And therefore, if I get into an opportunity with somebody else who's got a child at that stage, I could maybe say something like, oh, you know, like what someone said to me. They said, oh, well, you know, of course in China babies don't wear nappies, it's a thing. And that is all they said, and that literally began this whole career for me. That one statement. So you don't have to lecture people about what they should and shouldn't do, but you can just simply drop some information in there that may or may not be interesting to them, that they then decide to pursue. And just, you know, by doing that, you're sharing that knowledge. That's something that you can really help other people with. And so I think that's the reason why it's good for parents to reflect and think maybe what they would have done differently, but also it's never too late. So whatever age your child is, whether you start with a newborn baby or a 5-year-old, or in some cases, as I've worked with recently, and much older children, 9, 10, who have developmental issues and have just never ever been exposed to anything other than a nappy. So whenever you start, you always have to go through the same 3 phases. And the first one is that you become aware of what your body is doing. You notice things, you know what's happening. Secondly, that you know what to do with it, so where it needs to go. And thirdly, that you can do that on your own. Now, some kids, if they've got developmental difficulties or physical issues, or they may never get to be completely independent. But research shows that even children with developmental difficulties or challenges, or however you want to describe that, they can mostly get to the point of having some independence. It may take them longer. They may need a slightly different input or a level of support, but they can do it. And so whenever you're thinking, you know, at some point, I want my child to be out of nappies, it's never too late to start building that awareness and teaching them what they need to know. So there's never a kind of, oh, well, it's too late for that now, because you're always going to work from that. From the day they're born to the day that they do it independently is one long journey. And it's up to you how you approach that journey. Do you want to do nothing about it for ages and then teach them, or do you want to do a little bit at the beginning and then increase that learning? And to me, doing a little bit all along, it's like you create a path of learning that gradually goes up and up and up like this, to the point where they're independent. Whereas a child who's never is like learning nothing, and then all of a sudden, no nappies, and they have to do this massive big curve of learning in a very short space of time. So that's where you get that problems coming, because the child's like, whoa, hang on a minute, this isn't important to me, but you're making me do all this stuff and I don't want to. And it's normally at the toddler age when they're most defiant and wanting to assert their independence. So that's when you get the clashes. But, you know, whenever you do it, you got to do it. You got to start. And it's, you know, it's never too late to begin thinking about that. Unless, of course, you've ditched nappies. But then why would you be listening to this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And those who are watching this on YouTube, they'll be able to see the visual of your wiggly hand going on that kind of trajectory of, you know, from A to B, and the journey of that. Not, you know, it's not necessarily a straight linear line going, you know, going upwards. It'll, you know, be wiggly up and down and round and about, and you know,
like walking, isn't it? You know, walking actually begins with your child being able to turn their head. because they develop the first muscle for rolling over, then they develop the muscles for going on all fours, and then for sitting up, and for standing up, and then eventually for taking those first steps. It's a long journey. It doesn't literally begin that one day they just get up and they walk.
Yeah, exactly.
Without having developed any of those muscles and without understanding spatial awareness or any of that, all that learning comes beforehand.
And I think that's huge. And yeah, what you've just said about, and I love like comparing that to, and it's the same as when you talk to your child or they're learning language. They don't just suddenly start talking. It's a whole path. So you don't not talk to your child until they're at an age when it's like, okay, now we're going to start learning to talk. It's like they're learning from it all along the way, just because they can't yet independently or form the words or anything. All those sounds they're making, everything is a journey towards that. And I think that, I suppose that's part of the mindset, is to have the same kind of mindset around learning to independently go to the toilet, that also is a journey.
We don't have to make a big deal out of it either. I mean, one amazing author who wrote about it, who I reference in my book, talks about, why can't we just see that the potty is like the high chair, or the bath? It's another tool in our parenting thing of life, like the bath is for bathing, the high chair's for eating, the potty is for pooing. It's not a big deal. We don't have to suddenly think, oh my God, I need to have the potty there, and I need to be able to see it, and I need to make friends with it, and we need to introduce the potty. It's like, did you do that with the high chair? Did you do that with the car seat when you were kneeing them into it so that you could go on the motorway? No, you didn't. You kneed them into it, and you thought, oh my God, that was the most stressful event of my life, as you walked around to the car, but you did to the door to get in. You did not think, oh my God, my child's going to need therapy, but I am. You might think I am going to need therapy, because it can be super stressful for parents, can't it? So the earlier you begin, the less stressful it is, because you don't have to do all that learning in such a small space of time.
So I hope whoever's listening to this, I think those 3 stages, just remind everybody, because I think that is the thing for this session today, is for people to take away a sense of those 3 stages, and to just have an open mind about how you do those, when you start those, and that it's okay to do it whatever way you're doing it, and start at whatever point you start. So just remind everybody about the 3 stages.
Okay, so the first stage is awareness. So this is that you are teaching your child to understand what's happening in their body. So most babies are actually born with a heightened sense of awareness around their bowel movements. Particularly, you can see them when it's scrunching up their face, and it's like this massive effort, and you think, whoa, what's happening down there? And then this tiny little poo comes out, but clearly it's quite hard for them. So they are aware that this thing happens, right? And you can acknowledge that to your child without doing anything else. You can just start saying, oh, you're pooing, and you might even hold them in a position that makes it easier for them to understand, that makes it easier for them to poo, like in a crouching kind of position in your arms or whatever, just to kind of say, I get this is happening to you, and I'm going to make it as easy as possible, and I'm going to help you get clean, so I'm going to clean it up, and it's a fact of life. So you can build that kind of awareness. With an older child, you can say, oh, your nappy is wet, okay, let's change it, or you're doing a poo, let's go and clean. Or you can talk to them, or you can role model that, like, oh, I think my poo's coming in a minute, I better go to the toilet, and you can talk about it and show them how you do it. So all of that, normalizing the whole process. So at whatever age you are, you can build that awareness of what wet feels like. So if you use disposables, try putting in some flannel cloths so that it actually feels wet when they pee, and gives them that biofeedback. Because with awareness, what we're really talking about is the brain-body connection. So you're bringing, so for children who've maybe ignored that, you're bringing that back. Oh yeah, it feels wet. I feel that, like I acknowledge that. And for babies, you're maybe sustaining that awareness that they're kind of born with. So that's the awareness thing. And you need that first, because the next step is responding. If you don't know what your body's doing and you're not listening to it, then there's no way that you're ever going to make it in time to the toilet, and not going to learn where it needs to go if you never get to use a potty. So initially for a young baby or a young toddler, that may be mainly done by the parent. So the parent learns the awareness of when the child needs to go. They learn some signals, or they know it's time. And, you know, maybe after a meal or when they wake up, it's the classic times to go. And they then hold them over the potty, so the child gets that experience. So then you start, as a parent, you respond for them because you hold them that way over it. As they grow older, they learn, oh, actually, you know, I can crawl to the potty myself. I can sit on it on my own. I've got head control. I've got good muscles. I can sit here while mummy reads me a story. So again, you building the skills of responding, the second stage, knowing what to do when your body gives you the signal. And then the third stage is the naturally kind of leading on from that, is about teaching your child how to do that on their own. So gradually withdrawing your input from the process. So as soon as your child can sit up on the potty, you're not going to hold them on it. Just let them sit on it. They can sit up, let them do it. If they can walk to the potty and sit down, great, let them do that. You know, and normally by age 5, most children have developed every single skill they need. And that includes wiping their bottom, which is normally the very last skill to come, because its dexterity is very tricky. It's part of the body that's kind of the wrong way around, isn't it? So, you know, that's a tricky skill. But normally by 5, most children will be able to do that. So it's about looking for that. And on my website and in my book, there is a very useful grid, and I'll share it with you as well, Sarah, so you can send it out with this podcast. There's a useful grid of what kind of skills children tend to have capability for at different ages. And it is grouped about the awareness and the responding and the communication, all those things. So you can look at that grid and think where your child might be, and you can see then where they need to go next. So that can be helpful when you're thinking about those 3 stages. I hope that summarized it enough.
Perfect. So yeah, we'll make sure that the link to that is underneath here, so that you can click onto that and see for yourself. And there will also be information on there where you can get hold of Rebecca's book, and she has groups that you can join as well to get support if that's what you're looking for. And of course she does one-to-one as well, you know, for people who are struggling as well. So yeah, you can absolutely get in touch with her for more support if you need it.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing some of your wisdom and having a chat.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much.
So great to have you on. And yeah, I hope it has made people think about viewing this part of parenting, this part of the journey, as just another part, you know, for us to engage with, another part of our parenting journey, and that there's help and resources there for you to have freedom around that and support your child through that, and support you if you're struggling. So yeah. Thank you so much.